You're listening to Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technology in the food and supplement industries, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams. Let's jump right in. Welcome to Food Tech Talk. Joining us today are Jill Stuber and Tia Glave, the dynamic co-founders of Catalyst LLC, an organization at the forefront of transforming leadership within the food safety and quality landscape. Jill brings her rich experience as a food safety coach and fractional director of food safety and quality, with a passion for building leaders in the foods industry and a deep commitment to enhancing food safety cultures. Her journey is complemented by Tia's extensive background in food safety, quality, and regulatory roles across a spectrum of settings, from large manufacturing to innovative startups. Together, they offer a unique blend of technical expertise and leadership coaching, dedicated to developing holistic strategies that elevate food safety and quality while fostering positive workplace cultures. Their work at Catalyst is designed to empower food industry professionals to excel in their roles and drive meaningful change, making them esteemed voices in the realm of food safety and quality leadership. So welcome to the show, Jill and Tia.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. We're so happy to be here.
I'm so excited because I think we've done a few collaborations with you guys, and every time there's just so many things that we get out of these conversations. So I really appreciate you joining me today. And to get us kicked off, I'm going to start with a question for each of you. So let's start with Jill. You've had a remarkable journey from working directly in food safety and quality to co-founding Catalyst. And this is where you're focusing on developing leadership in this crucial area. So could you share a defining moment in your career that has inspired you to transition from a hands-on role in food safety to focusing more on coaching and leadership development for the whole industry?
Absolutely. It's funny how we tend to have these moments that we're like, that was the tipping point. Like, that's when I knew the skills I was using were not the ones that were going to help me be more successful. And when I say that, that's when I realized my skills weren't going to help my team be more successful. And sometimes that comes, I'd love to say it came like in this moment, I just had this wonderful idea, but really it was forged in fire. It was an unfortunate incident where we had people in our facility who were, for lack of a better term, like probably not supported correctly. But the approach was that they probably weren't people who were going to be with the company very long. And it wasn't voluntary. And when that was the message that I had received, it really made me sit back and go, I'm not sure what I signed up for here. And as I move up the food safety and quality leadership role and the ladder, like this isn't what I expected to find. And I need to figure out, how do I better support my team in this space? How do I step into a spot that's different so that I can make a bigger difference for them? And so that really was the pivotal moment where I stopped and said, it doesn't matter if I get another degree. It doesn't matter if I get another certification. I need to have better leadership skills. And that first started with me understanding why I didn't even have the awareness of where I was at that moment. So it was really about self-exploration to get started so that I could then really understand how I contributed to not supporting my team the way that I needed to.
So it's like starting from that introspective place and now sharing that with others that are at that moment themselves, right?
Well, because, there were moments along the way when I look back and think, well, yes, programs were really important, but I didn't lean into leveraging my team as well as I could have. I didn't stop to want to stop, I should say. And I was thinking more about the business and helping be really a people pleaser about where they wanted to go versus saying, stop, this isn't working. Or wait, we can do this, but let's look at a different direction. I was taking a back seat. I was kind of playing in the role and doing the daily work, and we were still doing good work. So don't get me wrong. I had a team of people that were fantastic, but I wasn't helping them excel. And they had more to give and I had more to give. And so together, when I finally said, oh, let's do this different, then we all could step into a space where we did so much more together.
That's an awesome story because kind of like you said, I think people think of it initially as like, oh, what was this great thing that led you to this place? And sometimes it's a realization of something that's not working. How do I fix that? And how do I help other people who are in that same space? So thank you for sharing that. Love that. And so, Tia, for your first question, your diverse background in food safety, quality, regulatory, across a bunch of different sectors, it's giving you this broad perspective in the industry. What was a pivotal experience for you, or maybe a challenge that you faced that underscored the importance of leadership and culture strategy to achieve these food safety and quality goals?
I love these first questions. It's really the backbone on why we created Catalyst. And for me, the reason why Jill and my partnership work so well is that we really come from two different backgrounds and we had two different experiences around leadership. For me, early on in my career, I felt great about developing people and helping people reach to their fullest potential in their current role and helping them move to their next roles. And I loved doing that type of work. I tell people today, the work that I do at Catalyst is like literally the best part of a role if I was working in corporate. So I love that part of the job and I wanted more of that. How do I help develop people and help them get to wherever it is they want to go? I wanted to be a part of that journey. As I grew up in my career and started working with different organizations, for me, I started to realize that organization, especially entrepreneurs or startup organizations, but we also see it in mid-sized organizations and some larger organizations where they really don't understand how to create a strategy around food safety and quality and integrate it into their business. I kept seeing examples of food safety and quality kind of lives over here in this space, and we're trying to do work over here in the space. And so they were always coming to me saying, hey, like, we want to do this product. We've been having conversations. We've already showed it to insert retailer. And I'm like, whoa, this is such a great product. I want to eat it. But we have some limitations and we need to make sure that we put things into place so that we can support product innovations. And having conversations with organizations around how do you start those conversations early? How do you build in what's happening next with food safety and quality, regulatory, or any part of the organization, really? To be able to build that long-term strategy, we have to have a seat at the table, right? We have to be that trusted business partner. And so, I actually was in a role and got burnt out, overworked. It was over COVID, right? I was the only resource working on all of these mini products and expansions. And I was just burnt out. And I happened to actually meet Jill around the same time. And when I decided to take just a summer off to regroup and get my mind ready to go back into another role, we were also moving areas. I started talking to Jill a lot more around what she was doing, but she was in the coaching space. And it almost clicked to me that the work that we were both doing, we were marching towards the same goal. Because some of these leadership skills came easily to me early on in my career, this light bulb really didn't go off until I talked to Jill, where it's like people need these leadership skills to be able to even do the strategy work, to be able to build those relationships and influence and all these things that we think about getting work done. There's people skills behind that. And when I looked at the skills that I had, I realized that I've been putting work towards building those skills. It's just where my natural interest lies. So I put all my curiosity there and built there. But not everyone has that curiosity or self-awareness, right? To even know that they need these skills in order to influence and make a broader impact. And so actually talking with Jill and the work that she was doing around coaching, it was a light bulb for me. I'm like, leaders must have these leadership skills to be able to make the biggest impact they can at their organization. And realizing that really this skill gap is what's missing, we knew that we needed to create an organization to help fill that gap. And we see it a lot in food safety and quality because unfortunately, we're not typically the ones that's going through any type of leadership development. If we are, leadership development is structured in a way that's really operations focused. It's more of the give direction, verify, and then correct, whether corrective action or you're doing it well, you're not, right? And we have aspects of that, but a lot of our job is influence. We sometimes, most of the time, we don't have the authority to say, you know what, if you're not doing your role, then we're going to write you up, right? If you're doing your role, we're going to be able to give you these rewards. They're typically not our people to be able to do that. And so we need different skills to be able to influence and build relationships and ultimately get work done that maybe some other functions don't. And so that's really where we started to think around Catalyst and the reason why we created it, because our people need leadership skills in order to be successful.
Lydia, can I add to that as well?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I think because we're so technical, the other thing we do as technical people is we really lean into data and science. And while that is really important, I think often when we think about how people in technical functions move up the ladder, we often hear, well, you need to speak the language of the C-suite. And while there's definitely some value in understanding, like we need to understand how we impact the business and how we better support the business. But the way we do that is through conversations. And the way we do that is through connecting with people. And so even if we magically can speak finance talk or risk talk differently that works with the organization, if we still aren't leaning into how we're building relationships and being mindful that to change culture, we have to change our conversations. And so for us to be able to do that, we really need, like Tia said, to fill this skill gap of where we know we have great information about risk and food safety and consumers and technical things to make a really big difference for our organizations. But if we can't make that leap to do something a little bit differently on our human skill side, we won't be able to be effective for our business.
And I think you hit on so many important points. I mean, even just the idea of the food safety and quality being a silo within the organization and what that means for those leaders, because it's a different set of skills, really, like you said, than operations or the traditional track of like leadership training. And it's like you're trying to change the culture towards food safety at the same time that you're trying to be a leader to your teams and your peers and those above you. So it's a definite like unique need, it feels like.
It is. And one of the reasons why Catalyst, all of our leadership development is in the food industry right now is because the solutions that needs to come out of leadership development must be relatable. They have to be relatable. They have to be practical. And that's one of the things that I've learned throughout my years is that I'm sitting through leadership development and then I have to really put my mind together to think about how does that relate with my team? How does that relate on what I'm dealing with in my manufacturing facility or in my restaurant, right? Or in my shared kitchen space. That looks different within the food industry as well as other industries. It's nice when you're able to see how do I influence within this environment of food manufacturing? How do I influence in this environment of only owning franchise locations from a restaurant standpoint? That looks very different. And we're able to tailor that message to the industry because of our backgrounds. And that's one thing we wanted to make sure from Catalyst perspective that we're able to provide that, because that's what we would have loved growing up in our careers is that if I was just able to take these concepts and someone's like, this is how you apply it here. This is how to build better relationships here. I truly feel I would have gotten there faster, being able to help people, being able to remove barriers from my team.
Definitely. And we're going to get into a couple of the other things that you were talking about, Jill, with technical and all that. But before we do, if you can just give kind of like an overview about the offerings that you have at Catalyst and maybe like the process, how does this work? If there is a professional that's like, oh, I need that. How do you guys provide that?
Well, the first thing is probably check out our website. It's foodsafetykatalyst.com. And it kind of walks through the things that we do and some of our beliefs about why we're in this space to help people. And that we truly believe it's personal and professional growth. It's not we just do this because it's good for work. It's because we do it because it's good for us as humans and our well-being. And so with that, the services that we focus on are in 3 groups. Leadership development. We do a lot of work in food safety culture because once people do surveys and maybe make a plan, they still ask, how do we actually do this? Do we fill that space? And then the third bucket is with consulting, because one thing we know is our plates in food safety and quality are always full. And sometimes you just need a hand from people who have done that type of work before, or that you can help extend your team or whatever that looks like. But really starting there and understanding what is it that you want, and then reach out to us because we'll kind of help walk through what you want and part of what you need to be able to move to the next step.
Absolutely. At Catalyst, our goal is to support you through your journey. And so we support really when you think about an organization starting out, some clients haven't even made a product to put on shelf yet that we work with, on up to multi-billion dollar organizations. And each of those organizations, right, and everyone in between needs something different. Their culture looks different. And so we're able to work with our clients on where they are, what do they want, what do they need, what are their people asking for, where are they going, right? Going back to that strategy piece, where are they going, where are they headed? And we help create that plan for them and their people.
And it can be an individual who steps up to say, I'd like some support. It can also be, we work with organizations who say, we need an L&D partner to support our technical teams. What can we do that is something that will provide continuity, consistency, and progressive support over multi-years? So we do that work as well.
We've already covered a lot of ground. But one of the things that you said, I think it was Jill, that basically we're talking about a technical sort of person with this expertise there. So how can FSQ leaders best integrate that technical expertise with leadership skills to foster this culture of safety and quality and align with the goals we talked about, meeting it all the way up to the C-level, down to their team? How can they align that with the technical and the leadership together?
That's a really great question. We need both. Even when we talk about food safety culture and the work that we do, we need strong technical people with strong leadership, people skills. And the way that I kind of look at it, I'm curious, Jill, on your perspective, how you answer as well. But as technical experts, many times we spend, like Jill said, we spend a lot of our first part of our career getting really technical, understanding the ins and outs. What are the best practices? What works? What doesn't work? And then at some point, we switch where we are either managing directly or indirectly people. And we miss that switch of, okay, what skills do I need to be able to connect with people? If you're in this spot where, okay, I'm taking on some people as a leader, or I want to take on some people as a leader into the future, or I want to lead a team of some sort, I would say you have the technical down. How do you really lean into understanding yourself, how you show up each and every day? So building that self-awareness in the empathy arm. And then how do you really lean into building relationships and creating safe spaces and building trust with others? And some of that might be technical. If you're building a relationship with your manager, they probably want to know that you understand the information, right? That you understand your role and you're able to communicate that. That's the technical piece. But being able to connect with your team and other members. And so people will be able to come up to you and say, hey, like, this is what's really going on the floor. Or I have a really great idea that I want to run by you. Or, I'm not really feeling my best today. Like I might need to take a couple of mental health days. All of those conversations have nothing to do with technical and everything to do with people skills. When someone's saying, hey, I have a great idea, I want to run by you. Just how you show up in that conversation, whether it's, sure, come on in, let's have a conversation. And you sit down and you focus and you listen to them, and you take it out of that meeting and have other conversations. That's all people leadership skills, right? You can have absolutely no technical background to be able to do that. And so when we talk about technical and leadership skills, those are the things that need to marry together. So you can have those conversations so people will feel comfortable coming up and talking with you so that you'll understand the norms, right, of your organization and assumptions and behaviors, all the things that make up culture.
I've heard people say this in the past to me that we're all in a people business. I think we think of it so differently, but at a human level, this is what we need to be able to have that influence to grow an organization, to inspire others, to motivate, all this stuff that regardless of that technical background, is important for any organization. And then I love how you're sort of applying it to this instance of like, here's how you can take these skills and put it into this really specialized role that you're in. So I think that's an important distinction.
It is. I think also it's a mind shift set because we get so caught up in the doing that we forget about the peopling. And I truly believe that at our core, we're all good humans that want the best for each other. But it takes more than just wanting to be a good human versus doing humaning. So I think even as leaders, as we move up the ladder, we're good people. We're all good people who want to be nice to each other and do good things and be organized and have people have success. But that's really different than being intentional in your leadership. And I think that's one of the areas that when I look at even my journey, it wasn't that prior to that fire that we had, that feet in the fire type thing. It wasn't that we were doing bad. Like we were meeting KPIs. We were doing things as a team. Normally we'd probably say, wow, our team's in a better place than we have been. But we had so much room to grow. And it wasn't until I could be intentional on what I was doing that I could help my team members be intentional. And no matter what, as humans, we bring things with us from past experiences. We have stories about how people are or how things are or different situations. And creating a space where people can come in and go, does that really apply here? Is that how we do things here? We have to set up intentional moment to people. And as our careers or our roles get bigger, I really challenge people to think about how do you redesign them? So instead of having a grocery list of you're responsible for 23 things and only one line item is taking care of my team, how about we have a grocery list where it's, this is how we take care of our teams. And by the way, that team is responsible for food safety and quality, or insert the technical function. Because as leaders, our role is to make sure our teams have the support they need. It's not our job to be the experts anymore.
One point, Jill, that you said that I want to just highlight, like we have to take intentional time for leadership. And that's one thing that we talk about in our first tier of our leadership development curriculum is our technical leader boot camp. And each week for 14 weeks, we meet together for an hour and we're starting to end this spring boot camp. And one thing that we encourage our boot campers is to continue to set this time aside to reflect, think about what have you been practicing? What do you want to practice over this next week? Because in order to get better as a leader, in order to make sure you're taking care of your team, it has to be intentional. So you should have time set aside to reflect, practice, think about, develop yourself as a leader.
That is so important because I think a lot of leaders, they don't feel like they have time. So they don't take that time. So, yeah, that's an excellent reminder. And, we've kind of talked about the leadership for those in the team. And I love that perspective. And then earlier we were talking about the leadership within the organization and the influence. And so, how do you guys feel about the role of leadership in terms of moving an organization from a reactive to a proactive stance for food safety culture and putting that out into the rest of the team and the impact that that can have? And how do you guys approach that? What's your advice there?
The way that I think about leadership is that you really should look at each person in your organization as a leader. And what you are doing as a part of culture, driving culture, depends on your circle of influence within the organization. And so a lot of people think about, okay, senior leadership, they are the ones that are driving culture, and senior leadership's not on board, then just forget about culture, right? Forget about what you want to do, because if senior leadership is not on board, then it's never going to work out. That's the language that we hear. But in reality, senior leaderships actually have less power around culture than they think and others think. Senior leaders are really there to provide that vision. Like, where are we going? Where are we headed to as an organization? They have this information because of their role on what's upcoming and how do you want to position the organization for growth. Part of that should be culture, people culture, safety culture, food safety culture, and other parts of culture. The drivers of culture is really your middle managers. And we talk about this a lot at Catalyst because they're the most underserved group of leaders, but they have the most on their plate. They are the only ones in the organization that influence up down and across. We were just looking at some stats a couple of months ago where they're the most burnt out, overworked. They're the ones that's taking home work. They're also the ones that are dealing with depression because of all the work that they have and all the pressure that they're under. And no one's helping them develop these skills to be able to manage their workload, to be able to translate vision into culture, and to be able to drive that culture. And then, of course, we have frontline leaders that are there every day, and they are the executors of culture. They're the ones that need to understand the vision, but then also understand, how am I going to execute it here? How am I really going to connect with my people? And so what we like to work with an organization, or even on the individual level, is, where are you from a leader standpoint? Where's your circle of influence? And then how can you drive these things within your organization? And so as a senior leader, right, it's really around, how do you create this vision of what culture should be in your organization? And then how do you empower your people by providing them with the right tools, providing them with the right skills and development and all of those things to drive that message of culture and to empower their people, right, to execute. If you're a middle manager, then it's about, how do I develop those skills? How do I have those conversations with my manager and with others on how do I easily communicate up, down, across the organization while managing my workload? And then executors, like, they are close to it. And so building relationships, safe spaces, trust, all of those things that we talk about around leadership skills, people skills, really understanding where is their impact and how do they impact in the organization. So depending on where you are, your impact level, your circle of influence, we're touching you where you are and how to drive those true culture changes.
I love that. And I think the FSQ leaders are really the ones that are watching as we look at the evolving landscape of the regulations and things like FSMA 204 and other things like that. And they're responsible and they care and they're trying to push that to the other leaders within the organization. And it's kind of touched on this already, Tia, but how can they drive change and continuous improvement? And how do they make sure that these things that, are very important to everyone, but especially as that influencer and the guide to something like FSMA 204, how do they drive that within the organization?
I think that's a really good point. When we think about how do we drive things forward, how do we do it? And actually, I was just on a call with a client, and my question to this person was, how are you contributing? So, right, they wanted to move things forward, and they're like, but this is in the way, or that's in the way, or this isn't working well. And I'm like, what's your part? And what does your part need to be? Because I think even when it is a tough question. And so I think even when we have, doesn't matter which role you're in, and you're like, gosh, it's not moving forward. Food safety sucks, or food safety culture sucks, or we're not getting the support we need, or it's not moving fast enough. Well, how are you contributing to that? Have we been clear in our messaging? Have we been curious enough to ask, what are the things that are in the way? Are we wondering what other business things are happening that we have no awareness of? So for us to really move food safety culture and help people feel empowered, we have to ask, what are we doing today that's contributing to those situations? And that's a big question. If we want to see the change, we also have to be willing to see where it is. It might be reframing our perspective. It might be reframing the words that we use in conversations. It may be going, wow, you're right. I'm the one who's putting up the roadblock. It's not them. Gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that. But now I have awareness, so I can choose different.
Jill is talking about, like, the foundation of coaching, which is what is the tool that we use in all of our programs. It is because it asks those big, scary questions of ourselves and of others. And in order for us to really make a change, we have to ask ourselves these questions. Like Jill said, like, it starts with conversations, and we have to become better at having conversations. We have to ask the tough questions. And coaching gets us to those big, scary, uncomfortable, out of the box questions. And we feel it. That's literally the feedback that we get from our clients on, wow, like, this is a little uncomfortable. But you know what? We tell people this is going to be unlike any leadership development you have done in your past. And it's because we use coaching-based principles and asking those bigger questions and allowing you to sit in this uncomfortable position in a safe environment. So that when you're in that uncomfortable situation within your workplace or within your personal life, some people are dealing with things that they take these concepts and use it even in their personal life. It's easier because we talked about it, we discussed it, you've gotten some insight, and then you go and practice. And then you come back and we're like, how did it go? And then it's like, this worked well, this did not. Let me try it a little differently. That's that growth.
I'm so glad you said that because I think one of the things I think about when we're talking about this work, which is a lot to kind of uncover what are the metrics or the indicators that are showing like, okay, this is working and this is making an impact. And especially for those that are trying to transform that food safety culture, the traditional KPIs, what are those? But also what else can they look out for to say, hey, we're on the right track?
I think it's always fascinating because when it comes to culture or climate, and even when we talk about engagement, the things that we see soft skills reflected in tend to be harder to measure, or at least that's what people think. But yet there's plenty of published data that shows that when we improve confidence, when we improve well-being, when we improve communication and teamwork, those things do directly translate into profit for organizations. The thing is, are we willing as organizations and as teams to stand in this space long enough and do the work to see the results?
That's important.
It is important. So if we go, I did it that one time, and this is the difference between training and coaching. Training is the one time. Well, we did training on how to have better communication. We're not realizing any ROI on that because we're not asking people to really discover why aren't we having good communication today? And once again, how are you contributing to that? And now let's practice together and actually make it a priority. We have so many distractions around us. So when I think about how do we know it's working? I think first we have to ask, are we willing to actually stand in this space to make a change? And if we are, we will see things come to fruition.
You will see that you have stronger leaders leading your organization, having better conversation. You'll find out things about your organization that, wow, I didn't know people felt this way. Now you have it because you're building your leaders with these skills.
And you'll be able to see the places where it's happening because when you do the granular evaluation of engagement studies or different employee experience surveys, you'll see these pockets where you'll start seeing shifts. But of course, if you bucket them into the average across functions or across the organization, the law of averages will prevail and you may not see those pockets moving. So it's one step at a time. And like all good things, I can be good tomorrow, but great takes a little longer. And so if we want to be great, we need to be able to stand in that space a little longer.
We always tell people who are looking for KPIs specifically around culture is that you really have to take a look at where you are today and where you want to go. That's what you should be measuring versus we all say, okay, measure your audit scores, measure this, how many findings that we find, our GMP walkthroughs, what does that look like? And those are great, right? Those may be measures that you need. But when you really think about culture, you need to think about what skill gaps do we have and are we filling those gaps? Measure that.
And I feel like sometimes we're so focused on those traditional KPIs and that growth and this by this time and all of that, that we do kind of miss some of those untraditional innovations that are really making a change, that are really making a difference. And that's where you can't always just get that from a spreadsheet. And you do have to give it that time, like you said, to really notice where we started and where we are now. So I think that's a really good point. So last question before we get into the little fun rapid questions at the end is looking forward, what emerging trends do you guys anticipate are going to shape the future of FSQ leadership, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years? And how can leaders prepare themselves?
Things are evolving so quickly. And I think there's going to be a lot of things that we hear being talked about, whether it's AI or generational shifts, or there's so many different factors. But even with all those things shifting, when we come back to people, we can navigate any of those changes. And so leaning into people to understand how is AI going to play to support our roles or improve our outcomes. That's talking with people. When we talk about the generations are changing, it's can we lean in and find out what does that mean? Do our systems still support what people need these days? Are we evolving to ensure that the things we have in place are supporting people versus making it hard for people to navigate through our systems? So even though there are trends that are coming, there'll always be emerging pathogens and chemicals and new regulations. It's still about how do we help people be supported through all of those things?
And you see the data to support that on where we're going. One piece of data we like to show is from the World Economic Forum, where they talk about the shift in skills that's needed due to changes that's happening in the industries. And it's shifting from the top skills being things like problem solving and critical thinking, right? Still super important. Please don't stop thinking critically, right? We need those, but it's starting to shift that we really need leaders who are looking at whole being, well-being, leaders who are leading with compassion and have empathy, leaders who are able to build relationships and build trust in safe spaces. Those skills are becoming even more important because, our employees' needs are changing and what they want out of an organization is different, and it will continue to get stronger, that people just don't want to be at an organization that pays them money and then they go home. They want an organization that aligns with their values. They want an organization that's flexible. They want an organization that protects their well-being and whole being so that they're able to do what they need to have standard mental health in order to protect their family and be a part of that, in order to work in an area that they're passionate about. The data exists that this is where we're going. And really, organizations that are getting behind making sure their people, their leaders have these leadership skills, they're the ones that's going to win the war on retention and engagement in their organizations. We're going to see, and we have seen, not just in the food industry, but other industries, is that when we don't focus on our people, then we struggle with retention. We struggle with engagement. We struggle with retaining as well as hiring in general, because people are not hiring into organizations that are not structured appropriately to protect their own mental health. And we're moving there, and there's a ton of reasons why, but at the time, we don't have the time today to talk about that. We just know that it's shifting that way. And as organizations, we have to start prioritizing these people skills.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that we're talking about sort of like innovation and emerging trends. And it's like really going back to the heart of what an organization is, which is its people, right? But I love that the data does support that. And that's where we're headed. Okay, so I like to ask a couple of fun questions here at the end of the interview. So, for each of you guys, who within the world of food safety, food industry in general, would you like to take out to lunch?
Katie Jones. I'm a big fan of Katie because I love how she leads with heart. I think she embodies a lot of the things that we talk about and that we hold true and believe in at Catalyst. So moments with her fill my bucket.
That's such a good one. I would say, the person that popped into my head is Larry Keener. And he's a good one, right? Just to talk about, Larry has such a rich history in the food industry and food safety in particular. And he's a Black man in corporate America. And I started a networking group called Black Professionals in Food Safety and Quality. And so just to have that diverse experience, right? And being able to relate it to the work that he's done and the environments that he's in. And when you really talk about people and having conversations, the type of conversation you can get from him is just golden. So I love spending time with Larry, and I would love to spend even more time with him because I always pick up something new.
Awesome answers. I love hearing those answers every time. All right. And one more question for y'all. So, thinking back to your younger selves, and Tia, you mentioned like being kind of this, hey, I'm burnt out. And what advice do you have for either others that are starting their careers in food safety or even just your younger self of how to grow up in your career?
I would say if I could go back and give my younger self advice, I would say to focus on these leadership skills, like intentionally focus on them early on. I kind of mentioned early on in my career, a lot of this stuff came natural to me. Because of that, I missed out on being intentional in some spots. As I grew up in my career, I started to notice things, and I was just grateful and lucky maybe to have a manager that gave me a lot of responsibility, and I was able to learn from my first roles. But if I hadn't, I don't know, I have no idea what it would have looked like, because I really did not have the knowledge to even think about doing things intentionally. So that's what I would say is like, be intentional, seek out these leadership opportunities, and connect with people even outside of your organization.
Jill?
We had a guest on our show this week, Sam Pena, who said, your favorite subjects should be yourself. And I think about early on, granted, being in my 20s, 30s, I thought I knew everything about myself, or at least enough. What I didn't realize is that learning more about myself allows me to be open to learn more about other people. And so when I lean into curiosity about who I am and the stories that I tell myself or hold tight, it allows me to really ask those same questions from other people. And that's the building relationships. And early on in my career, I think I had too much messaging around, you're supposed to emulate somebody that you want to be like. And I know there's a purpose for that, but I would really say, be the best version of you in this moment. And to do that, that's studying yourself.
Awesome advice. Well, thank you both so much. This has been extremely insightful for me and for our audience. So really appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate having this time with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of food tech talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. To learn more about Trustwell and its technology platform that connects product formulation, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit www.trustwell.com. Thanks for listening.